this book, Southern Gods by John Honor Jacobs. For his first book, he did really well. That said, it is a bit choppy and a bit uneven. I really liked the characters, with Rabbit in particular standing out to me, followed by Bull, but unfortunately the female characters came off very weak, and I found that very unfortunate. I found it an odd coincidence that Southern Gods is so heavily inspired by H.P. Lovecraft, much like the last book I reviewed, Revival by Stephen King. The book felt uneven to me, with the first 200 or so pages being very solid, very character-driven, and I really did enjoy the majority of the characters. The two strongest characters, in my opinion, are Bull and Rabbit, which is odd because they're the two with animal nicknames. I also loved the book's use of music, as being a driving force for large parts of the plot. In particular, the use of blues music and rhythm and blues, and driving characters being blues men. My issue with this book is the ending, which I don't want to spoil, so I'm not going to go into particulars, just my overall sense about it. And that's that it felt exceedingly rushed. The first 200 or so pages have a certain rhythm and tone, and then it just shifts gears and barrels through the last 20 to 30 pages, and the book's over. It doesn't give a lot of closure. It does, which, you know, it supposedly maybe opens-ended, and the idea that these dark gods are still out there. I also didn't like Sarah's character and her relationship with Alice. Set in the late 1950s, Sarah feels very progressive for a white woman raised in the South in a time of segregation and Jim Crow laws. It feels like the issue of race and their friendship transcending racial boundaries is heavily underplayed. John R. Jacobs does make points of it to bring up this issue, but it feels like the book itself is trying to paint Sarah as a very progressive and forward-thinking woman when it doesn't give any reason for her to be so. She feels very out of context in character compared to the other characters in the novel. I do like how the references the veterans coming home from the war are changed fundamentally by their experiences, whereas the use of the two evil books and viewing them changes the reader. And I feel this is an allegory that evil begets evil, and it's a recurring theme in many horror novels, and I like that that was in there, even if it was so minor. I do like how John R. Jacobs differentiated his characters physically and gave them both distinct looks and feels, characteristics, and mannerisms. It was easy not to mix up characters, and it was able to paint a clear picture of who these character was, and it allowed me to connect emotionally to them. As with all novels that seem to be inspired by the Cthulhu mythos, also borrow heavily the idea of madness, and that plays a pretty sizable role when it comes to the magic and the forces used in the context of the book. And I liked the use of madness, and I can understand how maybe the ending is supposed to feel frantic and rushed and a bit insane, but it didn't come off that way to me. It came off kilted and sloppy, rather than any sort of madness. I do wish it would have went more heavily with music. Music plays a heavy factor in the first half of the book, and then is almost completely phased out by the end and forgotten. And I really liked it as a subplot, and I really liked it when it was painting a picture of the world the characters lived in. Often when reading a book, the easiest way for me to think of a character as an indistinct person within the world is to kind of picture what music these characters listen to. And Bull states the first time he hears rhythm and blues is though he's hearing music for the first time. This for me is very telling about the character, and I enjoyed his character immensely. Second only to Rabbit, which was really sad, as I was hoping the two of them would kind of end up like a buddy cop scenario by the end, or like maybe be the center of the ragtag group to fight these dark elder gods, but that never really happens. And the action and violence scenes also didn't strike me as the best, but still solid. John Hunter Jacobs could have increased the value of this book, I think, exponentially, if he would have just further developed the character of Alice, who, above all other characters, could have easily been the most complex and nuanced. Unfortunately, while she is a major character in the book, in large swaths of it, she is always a secondary character relegated to the background. And while this works really well into the context of the era, it doesn't work because Sarah doesn't work in the context of the era. And as a single mother to 2 children, working as a servant on a former plantation, with a husband that was a bluesman that left her, she is more at home in this novel than any other character, and she is the least developed. And finally, I kind of want to touch on the Dark Gods, which are numerous. But I do enjoy that the act of sacrifice is what summons them, and that they can be killed kind of, but not really. And how it's more about thwarting their plans than outright killing them. And I really liked that they needed to make bargains. They came off as unknowable and as malevolent and mysterious, in all things a dark god should be. I did really like Southern Gods, and John Hunter Jacobs did a solid job as a first-time author. It's a bit choppy, a bit raw and unrefined, and he could have just done a great job if it would have just had another 45 or 50 pages to invest more deeply in some of the characters and to touch on more of the subplots and to generally smooth the tone of the novel. I like it. I would recommend it to others. It's, though sadly, a book that I don't foresee myself rereading. And for next month, I'm going to read and talk about V.C. Andrews' Flowers in the Attic, which comes heavily recommended by a friend of mine and suggested to me after they read my review on the film adaptation. And I'll see you next month.